Williams speaking of horses. We are at Monona Terrace, a beautiful facility, downtown Madison, Wisconsin. We are here for Ag Day at the Capitol. There's going to be a lot of things going on here. You know, we're here with the horse side of this because most all of the states, when ag issues come up, when it comes to transportation, manure removal, groundwater, all of these things that come up in agricultural settings or agricultural, political, and lawmaking issues, horses are affected. So we're going to take you through some of the highlights here: groundwater, transportation, transportation of straw and corn stalks, various things that are legislative issues that are all going to be discussed here for the public at Ag Day on the Capitol in Madison, Wisconsin. This is January 29th. Of 2014. It's chilly outside. The cold snap has been going on. But watch now, because even our keynote speaker on some of these issues is going to be the governor of Wisconsin, Governor Scott Walker. So we'll have all this coming your way. Stay with us. Speaking of horses,
they're all different, right? And they're never big enough.
Throughout this state and country, creating pro-growth agricultural policies, or just simply giving farmers a shout-out during the State of the State speech. We can be proud of the work that he's doing on our behalf. I now have the distinct privilege to introduce to you the gentleman who gave that speech last Wednesday night, our featured speaker for today. Please give a warm welcome to Governor Scott Walker, a true friend to Wisconsin agriculture.
It's an honor to be back, and you didn't steal all my thunder, so that's all right. But it was nice to hear folks paying attention to our State of the State. But as I mentioned on the way in, it's the truth. If you look at this recovery, you know, we've had some great news in the past couple of weeks. Almost $1 billion surplus, and I'm going to touch on that in a minute as to what I think should happen with that. But we've had a huge improvement in the economy over the last couple of years. It's driven by a number of things. More people are working, more employers are hiring, personal income is actually up. I think that's one of the untold stories. Personal income last year was up 4.4%. That means not only are more people working, they're working and getting paid more than they had in the past, which is great news. In fact, second to third quarter last year was the fourth fastest growing state in the country in terms of personal income. But more people working, and then the day after, we had an explanation point on that. The monthly job report came out and showed that through December, the unemployment rate had dropped down to 6.2%. Put that in perspective, 4 years ago at this point, January 2010, it was 9.2%. So the unemployment rate is 3 points lower than it was 4 years ago. And if you ask an economist, and I suppose you could ask different economists, they might tell you different things, but the ones we've asked at least point out that it's not the same as some of the issues raised about the unemployment rate nationally, that the unemployment rate continues to go down, not only because unemployment is down, but employment is up and the workforce is up. One of the problems, one of the challenges nationally is the unemployment rate is down the last few months, but some economists have questioned if that's because some people are choosing not to continue to look at the workforce versus being hired and the workforce growing. In our state, it's not only unemployment's down, employment is up and the workforce is up. All those are really great things. I want to touch in a minute a little bit more deeply, but I want to begin by one thing, and I'm going to begin with it because in some parts of our state it's near a crisis, and more so, not just in parts of the state, but it affects you in this regard, and that's propane. This is an issue that started last fall. It didn't happen for one reason. Sometimes you'll hear people in the media say, well, it was in part because we had a wet fall, a late fall when it came to harvesting of corn, and yeah, that was a part of it. We had, because it was wet and late, we obviously saw a lot more propane used to dry out corn before it was put in the silage. That was a part of it, and we started acting already in October. I issued my first executive order back then to extend the amount of hours propane tank drivers can operate on, because we want to make sure they can get there. Now, we've continued to monitor that all throughout the last several months. Earlier, beginning of the year, I did an executive order to not only to build off of that and to extend weight limits. We've done some of this working with the agriculture community when it comes to at the end of the season weight limits, and I know you're talking some more about legislation, in particular to make sure that we don't have limits in terms of weight restrictions on our county trunk roads that prohibit your ability to go out and do what you need to be successful in not only your farms but in agribusiness across the state. But in this case, it's specific to propane. We've lifted that. We're working with our towns and our counties to make sure they do the same. I met yesterday with all the tribal governments to make sure there aren't any problems there. So it's not only county and town governments, it's our tribal governments as well. But as some of you might know, even firsthand, we're getting dangerously low when it comes to propane. It's not only the wet fall, it's a combination of that, and I don't need to tell you the day like today, but the extreme cold, continuous extreme cold, that's not only propane, but natural gas and other areas that drive the usage up. It's also, oddly enough, a pipeline that was down to carry propane, that was down from the end of November through mid-December. It's a little crazy if you ask me why that wasn't done sooner, but that's a whole other matter. And then, because in the past, propane had actually been in abundance, you've seen the industry the last few years start doing more in terms of exporting, which may have sounded nice then, but in light of all these other challenges, isn't obviously a big, an important thing for us right now to get more of that back. And so, for any number of reasons, we're monitoring this closely. We have really near dangerous levels in about 6 or 7 counties across the state, but it's all over the place. And so one of the things, not only in your farm, but in your homes, if not for you, at least for your neighbors, one of the things I'd ask you today specifically to look out for neighbors, particularly a lot of our elders who may not be paying as close attention, because in the past, the distributor came by and probably didn't have to check on it for a long time, or they're not coming by as frequently because there's not enough propane at all in the state or the Midwest. And so if it gets at 30% or below, it's extremely dangerous to freeze off, and it's a problem. Obviously, we don't want anyone to be in a position where they've got to move out of their home, or worse yet, have something awful happen. And so we need people to reach out and help us in that regard. We're also looking for ways. I just met again on Monday with representatives of the propane industry to talk about other ways that we can work on this. Unlike natural gas or other areas where typically that's driven by utilities, which are big, as many of you probably well know as well. Most of our propane distributors are mom and pop, small businesses. And so there are some challenges. The association's been good to work with. That's why I met with their representatives on Monday. One of the things I would encourage, I said this to Steve Freeze, my good friend and former colleague, congratulations in public as well as I've said privately before in terms of your leadership role here. But I said to let staff know after today, after we talk, because if you've got ideas, remember a few years ago, we had the drought in the bottom third of the state. Bill, you were with us. We got all the ag groups together, the Bureau, the corn growers, the dairy business, I mean, every different group got together, the extension, everything. And we got, as we often do here in Wisconsin, we got creative, and we had people looking out for each other. Remember, one of the ideas came out of that discussion where the potato and vegetable growers said, hey, you know what? One of the problems we identified wasn't just the corn and soybean crop being affected by the drought, it was the dairy farmers weren't going to have enough silage going into the winter because of the crop being cut down on. And so a lot of those folks who were growing potatoes and vegetables said, you know what? Before we put our last little planting for erosion, we put a little foliage on, and we'll, through the UW Extension Farmer to Farmer Network, we'll provide it at cost. And it was a really very creative, positive thing. It was one of the things I said that made me one of the most proud to be from Wisconsin, was to see, particularly the farming community, see folks step up and say, it's not affecting me in my region, but I'll help somebody else out. And so if you've got ideas, feel free, even if we've already done them, pass them on through the Farm Bureau. They'll get them to us. We want to make sure we're working with the railroads and suppliers. I'm going to talk tomorrow when I meet the president when he comes to Waukesha. I followed up with the White House this week. I met with our congressional delegation last week in both parties. We want to make sure there's nothing left to be done that can be done to make sure that we don't get to more dangerous levels, particularly in people's homes. Probably less in dairy, we're talking a little bit more in poultry, maybe in pork in terms of even using propane for heating and sustaining your livestock. But let us know what more we can do. We are committed to this. We put, not that money's always the answer, but in this case, one of the interesting challenges is that for a lot of these small businesses, because the price is going up so much, long term, we're going to ask the federal government to look at gouging and make sure that's not an issue there as well. But in the short term, I don't care what I have to pay, I'm just going to get it to people's homes and their businesses. But one of the challenges for these small businesses is the price is so high, suppliers are saying we want all or a significant amount of payment up front. They can't float that. And so we just approved an emergency meeting on Monday through the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation and WEDA, $8 million that we're working with the bankers and credit unions across the state to say we will back lines of credit up to 80% to make sure that you can help them float the money they need to pay for the propane, so that we don't have any propane sitting somewhere to supply them when people desperately need it in their homes and their farms and other business across the state. And so we're doing that. We work with the Bankers Association and the credit unions to make sure they all know about that. So that's not stalling anything. We also know because the price has gone up so much, and it was not too long ago, it was about $1.40 a gallon. In some cases, the last few days, it's been up to $5, $6, $7. You got somebody looking to fill a 200 gallon tank, $1,000 is something they didn't plan for. And so, particularly for low income, we put $8 million more in the last few days into the ability to provide low income assistance to folks needing propane. I wrote the number down so I didn't say it right. It's 1-866, that's a toll-free number, 866-438947. I'll ask that information to be around later too as well through the Farm Bureau staff, but that's 1-866-432-8947. If you got anyone, you can call for any reason. Don't just call if you need low income assistance, because what we found is for a lot of folks, because the price is going up, even if they don't qualify for that, those limits are set by the federal government, not by us. But if you've got somebody just above that, which we've got plenty of examples of that, still call that number. Because to their credit, the utilities have stepped up in the state and put more money into the Keep Wisconsin Warm Fund, so that even if someone's just above that level, we can actually plug them in and get them assistance to make sure they've got enough propane in their home, at least for the next month or so, as we continue to see this cold streak going forward. So I don't mean to overdo this, but I think for those of you who know, if it's not you, your neighbors and others, this is a pretty big deal, particularly in rural parts of the state, which is just about everywhere outside of maybe Milwaukee County. And even Milwaukee County, actually, Oak Creek and Franklin, a lot of properties use propane there as well. And so we want to make sure that I've issued actually an executive order declaring an emergency. So in the worst case, we're not there yet, but the worst case scenario, I can call up the National Guard if need be to literally physically help people out of their homes if they don't have enough access to propane. We're not there yet. We don't want to be there. We're going to do everything in our power to avoid that, but let us know along the way and help us get that message out to the folks as to what's available. Because for a lot of folks, I know growing up in a small town, a lot of folks, particularly living out in farms, one of the great things I love about rural Wisconsin and rural America is most folks are pretty self-sufficient. They're not asking for a lot. We're proud folks. Times like this, though, pride is something that shouldn't take the place of public safety. And if someone is at a dangerously low level of propane, don't be afraid to ask for some help, because I don't believe in big government. I think government should be limited and out of our life most of the time. But in times like this, in times of crisis, this is when the government should step up and work together and get things done. And please encourage folks to lean on us and the counties and our partners in the county and town level to make sure we're getting just that done. So, as we mentioned in the introduction, we're excited about where agriculture is in this state. It's specifically why I did indeed say this is one of our two key industries. It's why we're pleased in this last budget to put the resources in to make sure we can enact the production tax credit for both manufacturing, as we mentioned, and for agriculture. It's one that builds tax year 13, it starts at 1.75. By 2016, it builds to 7.5%. For just about everybody, whether you pay individual income or a handful that might pay corporate income taxes, that wipes out almost all of your taxable liability. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal. And for that, as I mentioned with one of the companies, one of the many examples I laid out there, that's a big deal. We understand that probably one of the best ways in agribusiness and agriculture and manufacturing to put more people to work isn't to wave a magic wand and tell you to do it. It's to give you more of your money back to reinvest into your operations, into your farms, into your businesses, into the things that make innovation, and invest in capital, and invest in technology, and invest in sort of things that make it easier for you not only to make more of a profit, take on more sales, but in many cases to hire more people. We want to help you keep doing that. And so that's why we did it for those two key industries. When I think about the state flag, there's a reason why the symbols of agriculture and manufacturing are on that flag. It's not only a proud part of our state's tradition and heritage, it's more importantly a proud part of our state's future. It's where we're headed. But we also know that's why for us to be competitive, we've got to put more of that money back into innovation. Because the reason why, when you talk about China, when I was over in China in April, we were talking about whether it was a $150 to $200 million 10-year deal for Wisconsin ginseng, whether it was going to Shanghai Dairy Group and talking about DDGs and how much they can draw from us there or anywhere else out there. The reason they look, even in places like Heilongjiang, which is an agricultural-based province in the far northeast part of China, abutting Siberia, where their conditions are very similar to us, the reason they look to us is because we're much more productive when it comes to farming than just about any place in the world. Our farmers are much more efficient. And so we want to make sure we continue to give you the tools and the technology to reinvest in new innovations, new upgrades, things along the way. You think about, the next wave of innovation could be much like it was a couple generations ago when my mother grew up on a farm between Belvedere and Rockford, just over the state line. My kids can't believe it until they got older, but she grew up, probably like some of you here did, on a farm where they didn't have indoor plumbing until she went into high school. My kids can barely believe it, but I think not too long before she grew up on that farm, electricity was the big thing that made us truly efficient and effective and innovative. Well, there's all sorts of new things in the horizon like that, but we want to make sure you have more of those resources to invest into your farms, to invest in your operations, to invest in those agriculture-related things that are going to make us continue to be, not only here in Wisconsin, but in America, the leader when it comes not just to agriculture, but feeding and supplying the world. We can do that, and that's something that's great because exports is a tremendous opportunity for us. 6% increase, 34% in dairy alone. When you think about all the opportunities and all the different options. The other night, my wife sometimes says I sound a little bit like Cliff Clavin. Isn't that guy in Cheers, the post office? I can tell who's old and who's not. The young kids don't have any clue what I'm talking about. For those of you under 30, that Cliff Clavin's the voice of the piggy bank in Toy Story, the movie. Some of you maybe know it from TV Land or something like that, but Cliff Clavin always tells this interesting trivia out there, so my wife always kids me about that. But I love talking about the great things in Wisconsin. I love not only saying we're America's dairyland, but we do milk and dairy better than anybody else. We're the #1 producer of cheese. We provide 1/4 of all the cheese in America. Nearly half of all the specialty cheese comes from Wisconsin, and all the other benefits of that. But I love talking about how we're at or near the top when it comes to corn and soybeans, when it comes to cherries. We're the #1 producers of cranberries. We produce 95% of all the ginseng that's imported into China come from one state and one state alone. That's Wisconsin. We have a proud tradition across the board. We produce almost as many potatoes and vegetables as places like Idaho and Montana. We are good across the board because we've got people. I'm proud to tell that story. In fact, when I go around the country, I love to go to D.C. and I start out with milk for breakfast, cranberry juice for lunch, and if I've had a good day, a Miller Lite or Line & Cool for dinner, and I've covered all my food lists. But it's a great story to tell because a lot of people don't know that. And they don't know even when it comes to dairy, they don't know how significant it is when it comes to cheese and other byproducts out there. We can help feed the world. We are the leaders in the world when it comes to innovation in terms of agriculture. And you're the ones that make it happen. And I know not just in terms of business, but farming. As I was growing up, my dad was a preacher, but a good number of the folks in our church were farmers. A lot of my classmates were in FFA and 4-H, so I found it by just being out and hanging out. Before that, I lived for a few years in northeastern Iowa, where I lived in a small town of 450 called Plainfield, where, by the way, actually early in the 70s we moved there. It's kind of funny, my state assemblyman was a farmer down the way, a guy you probably never heard of, Chuck Grassley. He's not a U.S. Senator from Iowa, but whether it was there for a few years in Plainfield or in Delavan, Even though my home is in Wauwatosa today, I'm proud of my roots and my heritage, and I get more proud of the people in this state, not only successful when it comes to business, but who understand that farming is a way of life for people all across this great state. But one of the great things is to encourage more young people, for future generations, for more, not only to pass it on from one generation to the next, but to encourage others who maybe didn't grow up in a farming household to enter this exciting and dynamic area. We need to show them that there are great careers, there are great opportunities here. And we're excited in new innovations and new investments. One of the amazing things up here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, as well as other places like Platteville and Stout and others across the state, we're leveraging the investments we make, and Madison alone has $1 billion in academic research and development. It's one of our shining accomplishments around the world, and a good chunk of that is tied to agriculture and veterinary sciences. People come here with animal husbandry, they want to know about this all around the world. We should be proud to proclaim that, not just as a part of our heritage, but more excitingly as a part of our proud future. And so I'm proud to be your number one, hopefully your number one cheerleader when it comes to agriculture and its impact not only on the state's economy, on the Midwest, on this country, and on the world, because we are the leaders. We want to continue down that pace. That's why in the past, we've looked at our agenda. A lot of you have helped us out along the way. We tried to rein in frivolous and out-of-control lawsuits because we don't want to put a barrier up to farming in the state of Wisconsin. We tried to make sure that, one of the reasons why Bill serves on the DNR board is because we understood it wasn't just about putting someone like Ben at DADCAP, who does a tremendous job, that probably is important for a farming community, was to put people in leadership at the Department of Natural Resources who understand it's better to work with people than get in the way after the fact. It's better to make sure that things are based on science and they're predictable in every part of the state, not just different in one part or the other out there. It's important to make sure you got a total mindset that we talk about tax policy. It's why in the past we reined in property taxes. We understand for farmers in the state that's a really big part of your cost of doing business. And I'm proud to say that's why we put even $100 million in last fall. And in this proposal I listed the other day, our blueprint for prosperity, we put $400 million more into property tax relief here in the state of Wisconsin, because we want to put more money back into your hands so you can reinvest as consumers and as operators of farming operations in the state. We understand you're better at spending your money than we are here in Madison. We want that. The other night I mentioned this, I got to tell you, when somebody said, well, should you hold on to a little bit? I said, out of that surplus, we put $100 million more in our proposal into the rainy day fund. That rainy day fund is now, with that proposal, will be 7 times larger. 7 times larger than it ever was at the height before I took office. That's the kind of prudence that comes from farmers. We looked out there, we've got a pension system, the only one fully funded in the country. We've got a per capita debt, or per capita pension and debt ratio that's one of the best, one of the lowest in the country. We continue to see strong economic investments out there. We're prudently looking ahead to the future. We paid off our bills from the past. We pulled back in the money that was rated from the patient compensation, paid that bill off. We paid the bill we owed to Minnesota. We paid back the money that was rated from the transportation fund, not just because it was a past due bill, but because we understand, as I mentioned the other night, not just in manufacturing and retail, but in agriculture, particularly in the dairy industry, we've got to have a strong transportation infrastructure system all around the system to get product to and from market, and it cannot be delayed. Those are all critically important to the future of the state. We also understand then on top of that, that the rest of that money, I believe, should go back to you, either through property tax relief, income tax relief, or changing withholding, so more of that money can go right back into your paychecks. We said a typical working family in this state will see an increase of $57.90 more per month in their paycheck on our proposal. That means more than $520 more in their hands by the end of the year. Those are the things that truly make a difference, particularly, talk about propane and some of the other challenges out there. Those will particularly help offset some of those other costs and expenses out there on the horizon. We want to do that because we believe, somebody said, well, why don't you keep more of that money here in Madison? I said, with a rainy day fund that's 7 times bigger than we ever had before, I think the last thing most people in this state want is for us to hold more money in the capital. When I hear all the time that people say, they certainly don't say to me, hey, you know what, my taxes are too low. Nobody says that. Most people don't say my taxes are just right. Most people say if you want to continue to fuel the economic recovery in this state, put more money back in the hands of the people and employers, the people that make this economy roll in this state, put more money back in our hands and we'll return it many more times over because we'll use it to fuel the economy. I'm confident going to the next budget. If you think about it, just with future commitments that we have, even with those future commitments some people in this Capitol talk about, if we have economic growth that just matches the very conservative estimates of the past decade, which includes, remember, 2009, 2010, you don't remember the recession that was going on then. If you go back a decade, and at the beginning of that decade, we're just coming off of the ill effects of the economy after 9/11, so you've probably got some of the most conservative revenue estimates we've had in several generations. Even under those conservative amounts, the amount of average annual increase in revenue in the state is 3.4%. That gets you $1.5 billion. Our future commitments are only about $807 million. If we just hit that very conservative revenue estimate, we will not only make up for the future commitments, we'll have a surplus of about $700 million. Now, I'm optimistic that we're going to do a lot better than that. But I also understand it's important to make sure as you plan, you'd rather be surprised that things are better than surprised at things went the opposite direction. But you understand on those very conservative estimates, the kind of things, again, you would do, in managing, knowing, particularly farming, understanding the weather can go up or down and have an effect out there, so you're optimistic, but you're not overly optimistic. That's what we've done here. We want to put more money back in your hands to fuel the economy. We think that is incredibly important. I would encourage you, for those who are interested as to what the actual impact would be, go to our website if you're able and willing to. It's called prosperity.wi.gov. Prosperity.wi.gov. There's a little calculator on there. It talks about how much you get in your withholding, how much you get in your property tax. Look at that, and then I would encourage you to call your lawmaker in the Assembly or the Senate, and if you like it, tell them. Steve and I know that when we were in the legislature together. Tell people that you support putting more money back in your hands, not in the hands of the government. We do that. I have no doubt we're going to see even better things in the future. Because we had a strong economy in this last budget we put together, not only provide more tax relief, property and income tax relief, we were able to make prudent investments in the things you talked about. To put more money into the Dairy Research Center at Babcock Hall, and a great partnership with our partners in the private sector, in the dairy, the cheese-making industry. We were able to put more money into things at the UW campus like the meat muscle or the meat science and muscle biology laboratory that really needs to be updated out there. And we did it again in partnership with folks in the meat industry. We were able to do it in partnership with Dane County, with the Expo Center out here to upgrade the World Dairy Expo, because we have one of the greatest locations in the world to show off the benefits of dairy, not just here, but around the country and around the world. We were able to do that because we had a strong economy, because of the reforms we put in. We can do that even more.
We just heard the governor, the Honorable Scott Walker, speaking here at the Ag Day at the Capitol. And quite a speech. He had no notes. And we hope you've enjoyed joining us for this Ag Day at the Capitol right here on Speaking of Horses. We'll see you